We'll do it live. Hi, and welcome to Speaking from the Center. I'm Tim,
Hi, I'm Nolan.
and today we are going to drink and talk about Russia.
Today we are going to revisit whether or not America needs to introduce a third party. No, that's not what we're going to fucking talk about. Not at all. It's more pressing matters.
Yeah, so Russia decided, I believe it was around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time yesterday, to invade Ukraine.
Yep.
So, yeah, that thing we were talking about happening, it happened.
Yeah, it did. It's not
And
good, Tim. It's very
not,
bad.
it's very bad. Um,
And they're not just like trying to seize the rebel held areas in the east. They're going for the whole potato here.
Yeah, they want the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Which is not good.
No.
Putin gave a few speeches before this happened. In one of those speeches, he said that he considered Ukraine to be part of Russia. And in the other speech, he said that Russia has nuclear weapons, and if the West tries to interfere, bad things will happen.
Yeah, Putin's a fuck. And we need to stop him now. We need to put enough pressure on them to stop them now, or this isn't going to be the last sovereign nation that Putin tries to claim as his and take over.
Yeah, that does seem to be the consensus.
Yeah.
Now the NATO has, or the United States specifically, has issued a bunch of sanctions on the Russian economy. We've essentially tanked the ruble. It is worth nothing currently. Well, it's at its lowest value ever.
Yeah. Good. Let's keep driving that down.
We have cut off Germany, cut off the
Oil.
construction of that pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there have been other countries that have put on sanctions on Russia: the UK, France, Germany.
The G7 leaders, all of them have responded accordingly by trying to cut Russia out of international banking and international markets.
Which is, I mean, apparently Putin was prepared for these kind of sanctions, and he's telling the Russian people that it's going to be okay, that Russia will back all of its banks, and they're going to try and make it up because the price of oil has now reached $100 a barrel, and Russia does sell oil.
That's true. Although one of the things to offset that cost here, at least, is the expansion and drilling of oil in America, which President Biden has said he's going to expand to try to prevent to offset the driving up of the cost of oil. Yeah, if America releases the hundreds of thousands of barrels it'll bring the price right back down.
Yeah. But the stock market overall took a hit today because,
because Russia can't keep it in its fucking pants.
So Putin seems like a fucking lunatic in this situation.
Yeah,
like,
he is.
Protests have broken out all over Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Yeah, the Russian people didn't want this.
And it seems, and from the reporting, it seems that he's acting unilaterally in the government in Russia. Like, there's some Russian leaders that didn't want this, and Putin was like, well, fuck it. I'm president for life. I'll do whatever I want.
I am the czar, and what the czar says goes. And if any of the nobility step out of line, they go to the gulag. That's the way it's always been in that country.
So, the invasion itself, it led off with a series of ballistic missile attacks on Ukrainian military infrastructure. And then the troops started rolling in.
Yeah, they've attacked. I have a map up here, which unfortunately I can't share, but it's
I think you can share.
No, it's on my other computer.
And then the troops started rolling in. No, you know what? Let me bring up a map and I'll share it and we can talk about it.
It's from the New York Times. It's just showing all the points the Russians have hit. They've invaded the separatist area that the Donbass and Lushansk People's Republic are claiming. They've advanced on Kherson. They've navally invaded Odessa. They've attacked Mariupol and Dnipro and Kharkov and Chernigov and Lutsk and Lvov and every other major Ukrainian city.
So hold on, I'll share the map.
Allegedly, Russian special forces and Vozduzhno airborne commandos claim to be on the outskirts of Kiev already. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the map from the New York. Is this the one you were talking about?
I mean, mine has updated because it's to the, you see that city all the way to the west, Lviv, Lviv. That one has also been attacked.
Okay. But I mean, this is the basic. I was listening to the news, and they had a former NATO commander on there talking about the 4 axes of attack that Russia's using, being from Crimea, from Belarus, and then
any pretense that Belarus was a sovereign independent state pretty much died today as well, because Russian troops that were on exercise in Belarus used it as a staging ground to invade. In fact, one of the more interesting thing is the large fight that occurred between the pitched battle between Russian forces and Ukrainian defense troops in the exclusion zone in Chernobyl.
Yes, the Russian troops took Chernobyl
by sunset.
Yeah, and for some terrifying reason, they wanted it.
It's on the way to Kiev. It's just north of the capital.
But there was a battle of Chernobyl. Like that's
yeah. It's 80 miles from the capital.
It's not a completely inert former nuclear disaster site. Like, it's
no. Many of those troops are going to wind up with radiation poisoning, and I'm sure a number of them are going to die as a result of just having fought in that battlefield.
And a rogue artillery shell here or there
could wind up disturbing the concrete encased nuclear reactor and start that whole process all over again. Which honestly is kind of like when I'm surprised Ukrainians don't just go ahead and blow it up now, claim the Russians did it. It'll be like when Chiang Kai-shek blew up the dams on the Yellow River and caused that massive flooding. It stopped the Japanese. It killed hundreds of thousands of people and flooded a region and destroyed infrastructure, but it stopped Japan. So Ukraine, here was your chance. Blow up the concrete barrier on the reactor and let all those Russian troops hanging out and all those Belarusian traitors get cancer and die.
Yeah. When I heard it come over the news that the Russians and the Ukrainians were fighting at Chernobyl, I said, "Oh no, that can't be good."
No, it's very bad.
Like I said before, Putin is a goddamn maniac, and why he wants Chernobyl? He's a supervillain, and he wants Chernobyl. Like,
he wants Chernobyl because he's trying to. It's unfortunately in a key strategic area north of the capital. It needs to be taken. So look at it on the map. You can see how close the two of them are.
Yeah, here's Chernobyl and here's Kiev.
After that, Russian troops were able to push into the outskirts of Kiev, or so they claim.
Yeah.
The biggest fights are in the east, in Kharkov, and around the.
I learned a lot of Ukrainian cities today. Kharkov was one of them.
I already knew a lot of them from the Second World War, but it's horrifying to see them pop back up in the news again.
Yeah, they were talking about that, how like Ukraine has been in the middle of this European land grab war forever.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting, and it's like, wow, I thought just Americans did this, but Putin was talking about how they were invading to denazify the Ukraine, and I'm like, there have not been active Nazis in the Ukraine since at least 1946.
The president of the Ukraine is a Jew whose ancestors survived the Holocaust.
You see, that's the real reason Russia had to invade. Ukraine was becoming too much of a free and democratic society. You see, in a country, you can tell when things are starting to improve and become more open and democratic when oppressed minority groups from that country attain positions of leadership. In America, it's when a person of color does it. In the Ukraine and the Russian sphere, it's whenever a Jewish person does it, because Russia has been one of the most anti-Semitic countries. The whole Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy theory from World War II, that was what the White Russians made up after they lost their civil war, and the Germans went, no, that makes sense, and the Nazis ran with it.
Yeah.
Like, no, this is bad. This is very, very bad.
It
the
is
minute Putin said, I don't want the Ukraine to join NATO, we should have signed them up immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll take action if Ukraine joins NATO. Okay, they're in NATO. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You going to start a war with the rest of the world? They're in. Sorry, Putin. Oh, well, he dared. We should have been the ones to bring the Ukraine into NATO and then dared Putin to do something.
Right, because then you could have put NATO troops in the Ukraine instead of having them on the border states.
Yeah. No, and that's absolutely what we should have done. Now Putin's launched his invasion and daring us to do something about it instead of it the other way around.
Yeah. He dared us to do something about it, and he said, I have nuclear weapons, fuckers.
Yeah, and we should call his bluff and see what he does, because you fire a nuclear weapon, you are immediately condemned.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody trades with the person who nukes the city.
Right.
Nowadays. 80 years ago, it was different.
When it was us, it was different.
Well, we were the first ones to do it, you know.
But yeah, and
nobody thinks it's cool to be the second country to nuke a major population center.
It's already been done.
Yeah, it's already been done, man.
One of the other things that was interesting is that Putin said that he doesn't want to occupy the Ukraine. He just wants to topple the government and install his own regime.
Yeah,
like he doesn't want to stay there. I think they learned from Afghanistan that they really don't want to stay in a country that big.
It's not a matter of that. It was always his plan. He's doing this to stop the pro-Western, pro-NATO Ukrainian government that's trying to get away from its abusive ex. And this is the equivalent of Russia showing up at Ukraine's house drunk, kicking the door in and saying, leave me, will you? Because in the Russian Federation, domestic violence has been decriminalized. Something we've talked about often.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is what happens. Now they're like, well, fuck, if we can let our men beat women at home, why can't we do the same thing on the international? Let's go get all our ex-girlfriends and smack the crap out of them.
So
Belarus is just too willing. That's the problem.
Yeah, they are.
Now they got to get somebody who's going to like push back. So,
well, and so a slight tangent. Does this force? Because I heard conversation about this forcing Finland and Sweden to reconsider whether or not they want to join NATO.
No, if anything, they're going to be scrambling to join even quicker.
That's what I'm saying. Is like they didn't want to join NATO, and now they're going to be like, well, we kind of have to now.
Yeah, well, now we have to. The Russians will invade.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if we're not able to completely collapse the Russian economy as a result of this, the West will have lost any credibility, any stand of like, yeah we'll protect you, because we failed to protect the Ukraine.
Right. That's what we're doing. The conversation has now shifted from protecting Ukraine to what happens after Ukraine falls.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, the Ukrainian government will probably set up a Ukrainian government in exile somewhere.
Yeah.
And we will refuse to recognize the new state, and we'll continue with the sanctions, and we'll encourage the rest of the world to do so.
Yeah, but China's not going to do it.
China doesn't care. China wants the Ukraine conflict to last a long time.
Yeah, well, that means they get, you know, easier access to Russian oil because it's not being sold to other people.
Well, not only that, but it means the West is firmly locked, squabbling over the Ukraine.
Well, that's true.
They don't want Russia to win quickly in the Ukraine. They want this to be a long, dragged out campaign so that they can go and do things while the rest of the world is distracted. It's what they did when we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, that was, and I mean, that was one of the big things for the Biden administration was after getting out of all the Middle Eastern wars, pivoting to focusing foreign relations on Asia and keeping China in check.
Well, now we got to worry about the Russians starting World War III in Europe. But hey, at least it's not the Germans this time, right?
No, but I heard that this might like awaken the German military industrial complex because they need someone strong in Central Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would be awesome. That
Imagine
would be fan-fucking-tastic if Germany ratchets up its military production, starts selling all of its high-grade, top-end military equipment to all those nations in Eastern Europe, and then gets to sit there and look at Russia and go, come on,
round
do
2,
it.
motherfuckers.
Let's go. Almost got to Moscow last time. Let's see how far I get this time.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like it changes the politics of Europe in relation to Russia. Finland and Sweden are going to have to really strongly consider joining NATO now. And
I don't
Germany,
think there's any doubt that they both will be like, sign me up.
yeah, and Germany's going to have to consider being a military power again.
It's almost been 100 years. Why the hell not?
Yeah, I mean, it's like 25 years short of 100, but you know, who's counting?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fine. It's 23 years shy of 100.
Yeah.
I say it's time. Let them off the hook.
Because the British aren't going to do it. And
I mean, Britain, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, if the whole of Europe unites, which this invasion certainly will, and they go, Germany, we need you to up your military production. We're going to drop the restrictions we placed on you after World War II. I mean, all bets are off. The Russians will have lost more.
yeah,
Their geopolitical standing will shrink. Their economy will shrink. What Russia desperately needs is a Bolshevik revolution.
yeah, and we talked about that.
Yeah.
How they need, you know, I mean, this might do it. If day one of the invasion sparked protests in St. Petersburg and Moscow.
Yeah, what's going to happen a week from now when hyperinflation hits and wheelbarrows of rubles are needed to buy bread?
Well, they already said the banks, they're out of money.
Yeah.
There's no more rubles to go around. People tried to take money out of the banks and there's no more.
So day one, there's already been a run on the banks and the ruble is at the least affordable it's been ever in its history.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And that's like economic sanctions, you know, yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's not even like the worst thing that we could do economically. The mother of all sanctions apparently is removing Russia from the international banking system entirely.
And I think we should already be doing that.
And that's something a lot of people are saying, that like we should already be doing that. I think Biden is keeping it in his back pocket for some reason.
Well, I mean, you know, let the Russians go a day or so, see how this is, and then if nothing changes, if they're not willing to negotiate after a couple days or after the fall of Kiev, possibly,
yeah,
I would absolutely go, okay, you're out of the international banking system.
Yeah, it's called the SWIFT banking system.
Yeah, cut them out of it. That's probably what's going to happen. It's like, look, we've already done this, but we could still walk some of this back if you stop now. If they take the capital, if they take Kiev and the Ukrainian government has to flee or whatever, that's it. It's like, okay, well, you're a pariah now.
The last, well, not the last, but one of the other forms of warfare that is being discussed is the cyber warfare.
Yeah.
Us hacking them hacking us. Russia has already used some of that on Ukraine, but not as much as expected. And the United States is considering some cyber warfare. I heard it ranges from turning off the power to turning off the trains.
Yeah.
And since it's, you know, hacking, it's not very easily traceable.
Yeah. We should already have them on the SWIFT thing, out of the SWIFT banking system. And we should be using that as our backup.
And apparently Putin's not using the full extent of his cyber attack capabilities, because once he does that, then we know exactly what he can do.
Yeah.
And,
well, go ahead.
And it would hinder him from doing it again. Like once he shows that he can hack certain things, then the United States can figure out how they did it and try and stop it the next time.
I think the bigger issue for Putin is that The United States knew what Russia was up to, called international attention to it, and confronted Russia's ambassador with their invasion plan. Like our intelligence community did fantastic this time around. We knew everything the Russians were going to do before they did it, and we called them out on it. We literally confronted them with our domestic diplomats and in the UN, and we said, here's your invasion plan of the Ukraine. When are you doing this, and why are you doing this?
And I heard that Putin would have invaded sometime mid-January if we weren't calling him out.
Yeah. No, because we knew everything he was going to do.
Yeah. We have a question. Do sanctions have to be approved by Congress, not just Biden? Yes and no. Biden has the ability to do some of the sanctions, and Congress has the ability to do some of the sanctions.
I don't think it's going to matter. I think a lot of people are going to jump on the let's sanction Russia train.
Yes.
Although maybe not.
Anything involving like diplomatic sanctions, Biden can do unilaterally. Some of the economic stuff, Congress has to approve.
Yeah. But so far, because of all the warning we had, we've been able to build a coalition of our European allies.
Yeah.
So like the Germans were like, okay, we're stopping this oil pipeline.
Yeah.
And we're not going to purchase oil. And we're going to do a couple other things. And Britain and France and all these other European nations are like, yeah, no, you're out. We're done. We're not trading with you.
And the good thing about having that sort of lead time is we've also got Turkey on board with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And Turkey is a sort of a middle of the road kind of country when it comes to Russia.
I mean, traditionally they've been enemies.
Yeah. But I don't know, the current Turkish regime and Putin, they're not exactly enemies at this point.
The current Turkish regime shot down one of Putin's fighters.
Oh, I remember that.
There's no love lost there.
Next question. Same person. What do you think about the talk about bringing the Ukraine into NATO? It's too late.
We should have done it weeks ago.
We should have done it months ago.
The minute Putin was like, oh, we don't want this to happen, we should have said, oh, okay, it won't happen. Oh, sorry, it happened.
Putin invading the Ukraine took that off the table. Because we can't make them a NATO country now.
Why not?
It would only serve to upset Putin even more, and he would.
What more is he going to do?
Continue
Tim?
the invasion. He wouldn't matter at some point.
He's going to invade and continue it no matter what. Let's sign them up. Let's start sending troops in and say, okay, now we're in the western part of the Ukraine. This part's going to remain free Ukraine. Go ahead, push us.
And we're going to get a Korean War situation where there's going to be a.
That's fine. That's fine. Let the Russians do that.
We have another question from YouTube. Do you think it's right of the West to deny Russia's demands as a neutral zone?
Well, given that they're not the Romulans, I'd say yes.
So Russia, the Russian foreign minister did offer Ukraine a surrender, and the conditions of the surrender would be that Ukraine would be a neutral country and they would have to completely disarm.
Why?
It's just something that they offered.
That's great. Fuck off, Russia. Go home, drink yourself into oblivion, and keep beating your wives. No, Russia is a neo-fascist state, and it needs to be stood up to, and it needs to be stopped now. Yeah, this is the dark portent that anybody who knows history of the 20th century can point to and go, yeah, remember when Hitler started doing this shit?
Yeah. And it's another tactic by the Russian government and specifically Putin. He was offering all of these peace negotiations and all this stuff right up until, and even now, he's still offering peace negotiations. I've already invaded Ukraine, but if you guys want to talk, you can talk. That's what he's saying. Yeah,
because he's trying to win any kind of public or foreign support that he can. It's a PR campaign now. He's already done the bad thing. Now he wants to try to make it look like he's the good guy.
And the offering the surrender where Ukraine is a neutral zone is just another one of those tactics. It wouldn't happen.
You cannot expect a sovereign nation to willingly disarm after you've already attacked them.
Another question. What about the promise of no east expansion of NATO and the Cuban Missile Crisis? I don't know what you mean by "and the Cuban Missile Crisis."
I don't know how the Cuban Missile Crisis is related. There was talk at the collapse of the Soviet Union with the first incarnation of the Russian Federation under Boris Yeltsin that NATO would not expand east into Eastern Europe, places that had recently gotten their independence, such as Poland, Hungary, Romania. Those countries wouldn't become part of NATO. There was talks between Yeltsin and the first George
Senior.
Bush, Bush Senior administration, but Russia fell the fuck apart pretty hard after the Soviet Union broke up, and most analysts were like, "There's no reason not to. This is a European defensive treaty." I mean, one could argue that since NATO was specifically designed to counter the Soviet Union, after that had happened.
Oh, we have a new question.
Well, those are two very different things.
So if the question is for anyone who, well, we're on Spotify now, by the way, so that's why I'm reading all of these. If the U.S. can dictate Cuba be free of nukes, why can't Russia dictate Ukraine be free of NATO weapons?
Well, because nobody's talking about putting nuclear weapons in the Ukraine. And those weren't Cuban nuclear weapons. Those were Soviet nuclear weapons that were being pointed at the United States. NATO, what?
From Cuba, like right in our back door.
Yeah, well, so, I get the comparison. Cuba's in our backyard. Ukraine is in Russia's front yard, realistically. But, and yeah, I get the comparison.
There was a clear promise, not an inch of the east, of James Baker, U.S. Foreign Minister.
Nothing was written down. There were no treaties or anything. Anything else is hearsay without any formal signing of a document. That's kind of how international law works. James Baker could go right ahead and say, "Oh, not an inch," and then the Clinton administration comes along and says, oh, "The Russians are done. Let's open the gates of NATO to whoever wants to be in."
And, the problem with completely disarming the Ukrainian military, it's not making Ukraine any safer. Like that, and then at that point, it's just like a snatch and grab by the Russians. Whenever they want to take it, they can just take it.
Yeah.
Even at this point, the Ukrainian military is not the Russian military. And, the battles they're fighting, they're not winning.
I love the fact that the Ukrainian government armed its troops, mobilized its army, and then basically threw its arsenal's doors open and said, "Anybody who wants a gun to fight the Russians, come grab one."
Oh, yeah. Zelensky said, grab a gun and start fighting to everyone.
He said, "Anybody who wants to fight the Russians, the arsenals are open. Come to the barracks, come to the arsenals. We'll give you weapons."
And I've heard that at least in some battles, the Russian military has not had an easy time against the Ukrainians. They've lost helicopters, they've lost fighter jets, they've lost tanks.
Have you heard about the Ghost of Kiev?
No.
There is a Ukrainian fighter pilot. He's piloting a God, what the hell is it called?
Who made it?
I don't know. He's in a what's called a Fulcrum aircraft. I'm not 100% sure what it is. But he's already shot down 4 Russian aircraft.
Damn.
He's working on his 5th. He's shot down 2 Su-35s, 1 Su-27, 1 MiG-29, and 2 Su-25s. He is the first fighter ace of the 21st century.
Wow. But they've had a tough time. There have been a bunch of helicopters that have been taken down by Stinger missiles. They've disabled some armored personnel carriers.
Yeah.
Some Russian tanks. Like, I think what we were talking about last time we talked about this, where the Russian army has a really good front line, and then behind that is just guys on horses.
Yeah. It's still like one of the guys on CNN was talking about this column of tanks going by, and he's like, "I'm not sure. It's some model of the T-72," and it's like, really? Really, Russia? You're still invading with stuff from the 70s. Good job. Yeah, you're clearly ready for this.
Well, and that was one of the things. So there are certain things that in modern warfare that is expected when you start an invasion. At least this is what I've heard from American commanders doing interviews. The first is missile strikes and bombarding airfields and ammo dumps and stuff like that. Accompanied by that is usually jamming of all electronic signals.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the ground is softened up from the first wave of airstrikes, then you invade. The Russians haven't jammed any Ukrainian communications. And it seems like that should have happened, but it didn't. So the Ukrainians still have some sort of command and control of frontline troops because they can still speak to each other.
Yeah.
And it's slowing the Russian advance at least a little bit.
I mean, hey, good for the Ukrainians.
We have more comments in the comment section.
Cool.
I'm not a fan of Putin, but I'm totally against NATO. They didn't secure the peace. They broke their promise and kept the Cold War and the Middle East exploitation going.
I mean, NATO was not involved in any of the campaigns in the Middle East, I don't think, except for the first Iraq War. Maybe. And that was, I don't even know that was NATO. That one was backed by the UN.
Yeah, that was backed by the UN.
So the Iraq War was a UN mandated thing. And so
are we talking about the first Iraq War, the Gulf War?
Yeah, the Gulf War was backed by the United Nations. That was UN sanctioned. That was not a NATO operation. Most of NATO was involved, but
yeah. But that's because Saddam invaded Kuwait.
Yeah, that's again all of NATO. Also, all of NATO is also part of the UN. So I mean, that was
yeah.
That's not really a thing. And I don't know about what like Cold War. I mean, if Russia wasn't trying to annex and invade its neighbors, I mean, there is a point to be made that maybe we didn't need NATO after the Cold War. Maybe if NATO had disbanded, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in.
Well, maybe Putin wouldn't feel as threatened as he does with Ukraine joining NATO.
I don't know. I don't know how much of this is in response to NATO threatening him and how much of it is Putin in his old age trying to secure a greater legacy.
I mean, a lot of these European countries would still be in an alliance of some sort.
Yeah, I don't...
Like, the European Union is, I know it's an economic alliance, but it could be a military alliance as well.
Yeah.
If there was no NATO, then the European Union would be a military alliance.
More than likely. I mean, we don't know because we don't live in a world where that's happened, but that does seem like a logical conclusion. If after the Cold War, America was to back down and go, okay, well, the Soviet Union's been defeated. We don't really need NATO anymore. Europe probably would have moved towards some sort of joint EU military operation as well.
Yeah. They certainly wouldn't give the United Nations a standing army. That wouldn't happen.
No. I don't think anybody wants to see that.
There was a coup d'etat in Ukraine after the Maidan massacre.
Oh, really?
I don't know what the Maidan massacre is.
I don't think it's real. I think it's...
What year did this happen?
Well, he's talking about the coup that led to the annexation of Crimea.
Oh, in 2014.
In 2014, when the pro-Russian Ukrainian government was toppled by an internal revolt, essentially, against Moscow's meddling in Ukrainian affairs.
The new Ukrainian government is a nationalist right-wing party.
Yeah, because those nationalist right-wingers in the former Eastern Bloc are well known for their toleration of Jewish people.
Especially if he was their president.
Yeah, they're not anti-Semitic or anything. So I don't know what kind of propaganda that is, but that's cool. Sure.
I mean, I am not an expert on the Ukraine.
I mean, what I'm hearing is thinly veiled like excuses that Putin made for why he invaded. He had to denazify the Ukraine.
Well, yeah, we were talking about that before. He said that he had to denazify. When was the last time there was a Nazi in the Ukraine?
Well, it depends. Active or non-active? Because we're talking about active Nazis, 45, 46. Generally, they were all gone. I mean, there were probably a few still doing work in slave labor gulags in the 50s, And a couple being sent through the Ukraine to be repatriated back to Eastern Germany. But
it's it's been a couple of decades at least. But yeah, moving on. So what do we do? What happens next?
I mean, he has to be stopped. We have to stand up to them.
So, I mean, do we stop him? I mean, obviously, no one's stopping him right now from just taking the whole of Ukraine for himself.
Right.
Like, Russia is just going to, if Putin says what he's going to do, if he says what he means,
he's going to topple the current democratically elected Ukrainian government and install a pro-Moscow puppet. Basically, turn the Ukraine into what Belarus is now, a Russian republic in everything but name.
And then obviously we're going to continue the sanctions no matter what.
Yeah, so no, we have to.
It's going to end up being just a Ukrainian neutral zone between
No,
NATO.
It's not going to be a Ukrainian neutral zone. I mean, it's going to be a pro-Russian puppet. There will be Russian troops on the borders of Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia.
That's what I'm saying is like Putin is using the Ukraine as like a buffer between him and the West.
No, it's not going to be a buffer. It's going to be a launching pad.
Right, but I mean, what is he going to do? Is he going to take Finland? Is he going to Estonia and Latvia? I mean, they're NATO countries.
Yeah, he's going to threaten. He's going to threaten imposture.
I mean, after Ukraine, there's not really anywhere he can go besides Finland that isn't going.
This is not. I know the title of the episode is Risk, but it's like this is not a game of like Axis and Allies or Hearts of Iron. It doesn't have to make sense. He was demanding that NATO pull its troops out of all of Eastern Europe.
Yeah, and I remember some of his original complaints were the missile defense systems that were placed in at border countries.
Again, yeah, because Russia has missiles, and as we're seeing, will clearly use them. Why shouldn't these countries be allowed to defend themselves?
Yeah.
Because it makes Putin uncomfortable? Well, tough shit.
So, yeah, we got to stop him, but I mean, we can't. It's a rock and a hard place situation because.
No, the problem is we failed to stop him before he invaded the Ukraine.
Yeah.
We should have signed Ukraine up for NATO months ago.
Yeah. Well, as soon as he said, hey, that Ukraine country, I don't really
want that in NATO. We should have said, oh, you don't want it in NATO? Well, it's in NATO now. What are you going to do? And challenged him. He's a bully. He's a prick. He's not going to back down unless we present him with a united front and okay, do this and it's war. And let him be the one to plunge the war into, the world into war.
Well, honestly.
Because he won't do that.
Right. Right.
He was willing to move on Ukraine because we dithered, we tried diplomacy, we did all these other things rather than just, aggressively say, no, we're letting Ukraine in NATO. End of story.
Well, we should have done it in 2014 when he threatened to take the Crimea.
No, he didn't threaten to take it. He just did it overnight. And yeah, we sanctioned him then, but we should have been tougher on it.
You should have said the rest of Ukraine. You guys are.
When he did it in 2014, when he took the Ukraine and we started sanctioning him, that is when we should have been like, hey, let's help these Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And get them into NATO.
Well, the whole conversation then was which Ukrainian opposition group do we back? Like which, and we should have just backed because their government also toppled at that point too, right? Didn't they have the
Ukrainian government fell, the pro-Moscow government fell before Russia took Crimea. Russia took Crimea as a reaction to that.
I see. So they lost the government they wanted, so they took Crimea because they needed it.
Because they still had leases with the old pro-Moscow regime to allow the Russian Black Sea Fleet to operate out of Sevastopol and other Crimean ports. The fear in Moscow was that with this new non-pro-Moscow, non-Putin picked, or at least Putin approved leadership, that without that, they would lose access to those ports. So
now here's the real question. if Putin was clamoring for the Ukraine since 2014, why didn't he do anything between 2016 and 2020?
He needed the heat to die down, man.
Well, yeah, but he had like, you know,
Why didn't he? Because there was a regime in the United States that was friendly towards him, that was ending sanctions, that was sharing intel. Why jeopardize that by putting that regime in a position where it would have to be tougher on him than they were?
well, I mean, even then, like, if he told Trump, hey, listen, hey, I'm gonna take the Ukraine, and Trump was like, that's probably not like Trump would be like, oh, because right now he's talking about, oh, Putin's doing smart things, saying, we're just taking these two rebel controlled portions of Ukraine and declaring them independent, and then he invaded all of Russia, all of the Ukraine anyway.
Yeah.
But he had Trump in his pocket the whole time, so Trump could have done something, hindered NATO in some way.
Yeah, I think, but I don't know that. I mean, first of all, there's a fair amount of distrust between Russia and the West, regardless.
Yeah,
But I think what really made Putin go, now's the time, is watching how badly the US handled its transition of power.
yeah,
The 2020 election, the transition in was it 2021, January 6th?
yes.
I mean, that really just showed to the world how unstable and disunited the United States is.
So you're saying between the taking of Crimea, the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and President Obama's lack of response,
I mean, we
and
sanctioned him, but why didn't he keep going? Because if he had pushed the Obama administration, they would have reacted.
yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying is between then and now, like you're saying that you've
Because
seen
the heat
Ukraine
was on him,
continue,
man.
huh?
The heat was on him. They had to
Well,
wait.
I know that's what I'm saying, but you're saying that between 2014 and the insurrection on January 6th, he saw American weakness and was like, now's the time.
He didn't, it wasn't a matter of weakness. It was a matter of what happened was it had been 8 freaking years since they took Crimea and basically got away with it. And they
Yeah,
had to wait. They had to wait to see how the West would react and how long before these cries of, oh, freedom for the Ukraine, before all that died out.
yeah,
And the answer was about 2 years. Then there was a friendly US government, or a government that was friendly towards the Putin regime, right?
mm-hmm.
And they went, well, why jeopardize that? Because if he had pushed for the Ukraine in like 2017 or 2018, Trump would have had to react. He would have had to have took a stance against Russia.
Right.
He would have had to.
I mean, politically, he would have had to, just in America, if he didn't react to Russia doing that.
If Russia was doing what it's doing now in, like, say 2018, and Trump did nothing, like, even his own party would have abandoned him.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
they weren't fully Trump at that point.
They had to. So they waited. They played the waiting game. They saw how bad things went down in 2020 at the election, and they went, fuck, now's the time.
Yeah.
Half of America will be too busy arguing with themselves over this to do anything about us. So
I had another point, but it's gone now. Man. I was going to say, oof, it's gone now. So the Ukrainian president Zelensky, he is opting to currently stay in the Ukraine and and help the people. I mean, morale wise, he's trying to stay there as long as he possibly can.
and he should.
Yeah, and the Russians thought that he would cut and run. Like, they didn't see him as a guy to do that.
Well, it's because he's a TV comedian.
Yeah. But like you said, he's telling the people to arm themselves against the Russians. He's telling them to resist.
I mean, he's in trying times. He's in very dramatic, very serious times, and he has two choices. He could cut and run, or he could step up and go down in history as, a Ukrainian leader worth a damn, and he's chosen that option, and good for him.
Yeah.
I don't know that it ends well for him. I wish him the best of luck and God bless him, but
well, I mean, if he was captured, he would definitely be on the list of people not to leave alive.
oh yeah, no, he's dead.
Yeah.
If Russian forces get their hands on him. But then he's a martyr.
Right.
And maybe that's what his angle is. Maybe he's hoping to go out as a martyr.
So it's a sticky situation.
It's very dangerous.
Because and they were talking about this on the news, like a stray cruise missile hits Romania, or someone accidentally opens fire across the border in Ukraine. That's the game.
Yeah.
But
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I don't see why we don't try to pull some false flag bullshit on the Russians right now, the same way they were trying to pull in Eastern
yeah,
Ukraine.
I heard about that. They were like, "Oh, they're firing on us because blah blah blah," and Putin was like, "We're trying to fight off the Ukrainians."
Yeah, and to the intelligence community's credit, they were like, "This is bullshit." And to President Biden's credit, he was like, "This is bullshit, guys. Here's what's actually going on."
That was what I was going to say before. Is Biden is the first president since I don't even know who didn't try to quote reset relations with Russia because he knows better.
Yeah. Russia has never been a friend to the West, and it never will. I mean, there's some argument to be made that like part of this is just Ukraine is sort of where Russia gets its legitimacy as a European nation.
Yeah.
If you go back far enough, without the Kievan Rus, which was a major center of culture and religion and learning and economics in medieval, Russia in that area, there is no Russia. There is no Moscow. There's none of that,
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, I mean, Biden sat through the entire Obama administration when Obama tried to reset relations with Russia, and that didn't end well. He knows he was a senator during the Clinton administration, during the Bush administration, during the first Bush administration. Like, he's seen all the stuff that Russia has pulled over the last 25, 30 years. And
yeah, I'm pretty sure he was a senator during the Cold War. So
I think he was. Yeah, he was there for the fall of the Soviet Union. And then all the invasions that, invading Georgia, and
the Georgian situation was a little different. To be fair, Georgia actually did attack them.
Oh, well.
And Georgia seemed to be under the impression that if they did that, the U.S. would back them and protect them.
Yeah, that's true.
That didn't happen.
Well, I mean, all that stuff, yeah, I'm reading the chat as well.
Oh man, that's awesome. Like, we have an actual like Russian apologist in the comments. That's fantastic. No, the Russians didn't do shit against the Wehrmacht, buddy. That was the Soviet Union. You're confused. It's okay. I understand. It was 80 years ago. It's complicated.
The Russians were a part of the Soviet Union, but they were not the entirety of the Soviet Union.
Right. And most of the army at that point was made up of like people from Kazakhstan and Siberia. But whatever, not the point.
That's why Belarus loves Russia so much. They would also like to be part of the Soviet Union again.
Hey, Eastern Turanitia is the ones who really are still part of. If you look on that map we brought up, that little dotted line in the eastern part of Moldova, that is the Soviet Socialist Republic of East Turanitia. The only nation that won that breakup to still remain part of the Soviet Union.
But that is exactly what Putin wants. He wants to put it together as much of the Soviet Union as he can.
I mean, Soviet Union, Russian Empire, take your pick.
Yeah, he wants former Soviet states to be part of a new Russian Empire.
Yeah, basically.
Under Vladimir Putin.
And I mean, part of him driving into the Ukraine is because, recently they've started losing ground in places like Central Asia.
Yeah.
China has made huge strides into bringing Kazakhstan and those little other Stanistan countries into the fold, into binding them to China economically, which has freaked Moscow out because it's like, this has always been our backyard.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on? So now it's like he's got to grab Ukraine or nothing, or all he's left with is Belarus, and that's just that's like not even getting a bronze medal. That's the participation prize. Like, hey, you tried it geopolitics. Here's Belarus.
Well, I think you're right, because China's so strong economically now, the Russia hasn't had to really deal with China economically until like the last 20 years.
Oh God, yeah.
And they considered them, I'm sure that Putin tightened up relations with China so that he could invade Ukraine without China saying, "Hey, what the fuck?"
Yeah, well, like a game of Axis and Allies, or better yet, Hearts of Iron. You got to make sure the eastern flank is secure before you attack west.
See, I do the opposite. I attack east and I literally stop the Japanese from invading China.
Mm,
And then I go west.
then you go west.
I just take it all the way down to Vietnam. It's all mine.
Okay, I mean that works. That does work.
I mean, it takes a long time because China's
Yeah.
a big place.
Well, honestly, at that point, if you've knocked the Japanese out, like you don't have to worry because what's China going to do? Send a bunch of poorly armed infantry at you? Like once
No,
you've got
you got to worry about those Koreans.
no, yeah, that's part of Japan at the time. You take that too, and once you've got that whole Manchuria,
Yeah,
Korea thing secured, you start driving west against the Germans and the Axis until you get to Paris.
I had I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I had a failed campaign in Hearts of Iron where I was doing that, and the Japanese had taken all of China. So I was literally like trench warfare in the middle of China, and I got nuclear weapons, and I just started nuking shit, and immediately the Japanese were like, "Whoa, man, that's too much. We're out of here."
Yeah. Did you play anything after Hearts of Iron 2?
I've I downloaded Hearts of Iron 4, but I haven't played it yet.
Oh, dude, it's so much better. They added in this whole tree politically for the Soviet Union where you can launch a coup against Stalin internally.
Oh.
And you can bring back the old Bolshevik Politburo.
Oh my god. All right, I'll have to play it then.
Yeah, no, it's called No Step Back. It is a fantastic expansion. Paradox Entertainment, you don't support us, but you could.
You could support the show, damn it. All right, so closing thoughts. Obviously, this invasion has just started, so we don't know what exactly is going to happen to Ukraine. How hard the Ukrainian military is going to fight. Apparently, their morale is fight or die because they're defending their families in the cities.
It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, remember Finland?
Yeah.
You push these small countries with no hope of winning with their backs against the wall, and you'll be amazed at what'll happen.
I mean, apparently, like I said, the Russian military is having a little bit harder time than they thought they were going to have.
There's this really funny bit the other day where Russia, one of the Russian ministers said, like, Russia has never aggressively invaded another country. And somebody went, oh, we must have fucked up the translation. Russia has never successfully aggressively invaded another country. Because, Finland and Afghanistan both spring to mind.
Yeah, I mean, you don't fuck with the Finnish like that.
Maybe by the end of this, we'll be saying the same thing about the Ukraine. Like,
I mean,
attack Russia, and they will fight you tooth and nail and defend everything.
Yeah.
Russia attacks somewhere else, and they just fuck it up and bungle it.
Well, and I mean, that's one of the things. Everyone has said that the invasion so far has been kind of messy on Russia's part, considering all the time they've had to prepare.
Yeah. Wow, what a surprise! The Russian high command is bungling a major invasion. Man, it's Finland all over again.
But I mean, who knows what's exactly going to happen? I mean, who knows? Putin said on the outset when he started this yesterday that he didn't want the Ukraine for himself. He just wants to install a puppet state. He doesn't want to occupy it because they remember from Afghanistan that trying to take a country that big and occupying it, not the greatest. So he'd rather just have it be a puppet state, and like you said, have troops on the border ready to do whatever.
Yeah, to threaten Eastern Europe.
But I mean, if he's going to do it that way, there's going to be a resistance movement in the Ukraine.
Yeah, and the West is going to fund it.
Yeah, remember all that crazy shit the CIA has done? Well, they can do that in the Ukraine too.
Yes, they can.
And same with the British Secret Services. And
I mean, it's not even going to be. It's going to be a thinly veiled European war against Russian occupation in the
well,
Ukraine.
yeah, it's going to be another proxy war like all the
Yeah.
other wars.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's as much as I want to talk about it. Do you want to talk about the two-party system now?
No, I think we're good. I'd like to thank the potentially pro-Russian bot in our YouTube comments. I'm glad to know that Moscow has so little to do that they can afford to send people to this backwater show. That's awesome. We're glad it wasn't just us and one other person like it usually is.
Oh man, yeah, it kept it interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe next time we'll get more Russian bots.
Yeah. Hey, who knows? I mean, hey, if Putin's listening, that's
Putin,
awesome.
if you're listening, we have a Patreon. I'm just saying.
I know you're a little strapped for catch, but if you want to send even a couple rubles our way, we would really appreciate.
We know the ruble's not worth anything anymore, so maybe a couple of thousand rubles.
Couple thousand rubles, but hey, whatever you got lying around the couch cushions in the Kremlin, we'd appreciate it.
Oh. There we go. That's interesting. So a bit of news. I should have talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, but whatever. No one's gonna listen to the end. But we are officially joining the Bin Podcast Network.
Oh, all right, awesome.
So I think this is our last show with the low res graphics and all that, because I'm sure we're gonna get an intro and all that stuff. Yeah, it's gonna. They're putting some money into this shit.
Oh wow.
So, the Bin Podcast, I'll plug them for a second. They do their thing on Thursdays. We usually do our show on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. They do their show on Thursdays at I believe it's 3:30 Eastern Standard Time, but they have like an international group of people. So
yeah,
Thursdays at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time is when they could get together.
Yeah, it's when the West Coast and London are closest together.
Go like and subscribe to all their stuff. Go like and subscribe to all of our stuff. And I'll put our stuff at the bottom of the screen. And I'm sure that our new corporate overlords will treat us kindly.
Maybe not. But hey, we'll have them, and that's the important part.
So if you are a Russian bot or Vladimir Putin and you'd like to support the show, Facebook.com, like and subscribe and share and all that. Go to patreon.com/SFTC and give us money. And Putin, you too can become a producer of the show, just like Shartan. And I have to plug Shartan because he's a producer of the show. Soon right. He'll be an actual producer of the show. Weird. And YouTube, which is a bunch of letters and numbers. So just copy that from your screen. All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Speaking from the Center. We will be back at our regularly scheduled time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. next week, to, I don't know, talk about what Putin is up to. Maybe he'll stop.
I mean, maybe. I wouldn't count on it, but if we make it to next Wednesday, we'll be back.
If World War III hasn't started, then yeah, we'll be back. Hopefully those sanctions work. I'm just saying.
Maybe.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Oh no, don't. I almost hit the button.
You almost kicked yourself out, right? That would have been awesome.
I'm going to hit the right